prayers. Her grandson, there was a shooting a couple years ago, and he was convicted of murder today. And so, apparently the evidence was pretty clear because they came back with a verdict in less than an hour. So, anyway, and don't ask me what it's all about because I don't know. I don't remember. I remember it happening. I know it was gang related, but he was only 16 when he did it. So, it's a bad deal. So anyway, just keep her in your prayers. So we're talking about God's protection and salvation tonight. At the moment of Jesus' death, an incredible miracle happened in the temple. Anybody remember what happened in the temple? Yeah. Jesus cries out with a loud voice, breathes his last, and Mark writes, and the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. What makes this a great miracle?
That thing was about 3 foot thick, wasn't it?
We'll do some descriptions on the size of it, but beyond God can destroy mountains, he can tear a veil. What was the impact of this?
I don't know if I have it right. It represents that that's not the dwelling place of the God any longer. That he's left the building. So that's the ending of Judaism as God's chosen people. Invitation's to all.
Yeah, God's left the building. You're exactly right, and never dwelt there again.
I think, from what I've read in the past, I think the significance of the veil being torn from top to bottom to showing that God, normally something gets torn.
I hadn't even thought of that, but yeah.
I read a couple articles on that.
What was the purpose of the veil? Libby, what was the purpose of the veil? Do you remember?
Separates the most holy place and the holy place in the temple.
Well, if the veil hadn't been there and you walked up to the door, what happened?
You would die, be struck down.
So, the death of Jesus took away the barrier between us and God as well. There's no longer a separation between us and God and salvation. Jesus destroyed that. And so we can approach God on our own. So, as we talk about God's promises, what are some routines you've developed in your life to remember God's promises?
He always was, always is, and always will be.
Okay,
I mean, to me, that's encouraging because he's consistent.
okay. JC?
I pray every morning, thanking God for a new day. That's my routine. Very typical if you get an all morning person.
Do you have something, Libby? Oh. We'll talk about Muslims praying on a clock 7 times a day, but at the same time, having a set routine keeps you from forgetting to do things. And so there's nothing wrong with setting your clock and saying, I'm going to pray at these hours. In fact, did the Jews do that? Yeah. They had hours of prayer. And so, yeah, from anybody else?
Well, I have a daily reading that I committed myself to for the last 4 years, and it's helped immensely to keep me remembering there is a God. This is what he does for us. This is how he's doing things. And I should be comforted.
One of my routines is when I see something in nature that screams out, that's God, then I thank God. And especially the thing I'm drawn to the most, hawks and eagles. I just love them. I love to watch them soar. I love to watch them dive on something. And whenever I'll see a big red-tailed hawk sitting on a limb by the highway watching for mice, I just always say, thank you, God. Because the beauty of them just, it floors me. I don't know why those two birds over other animals, but...
Jeff,
yes.
Kind of an interesting sidelight. When I was able to help Kevin Wilhelms harvest was always interesting because the hawk seemed to know the time I might be kicking out a rabbit, maybe a pheasant. It was just fun. They were sitting, nearby. Didn't always see them. You'd see them hovering around.
Bruce called us one day and he said, "Have you looked out in the cornfield next to your house?" We were living on the farm. It's like, "No, what?" He said, "There's 2 eagles out there." He said, "Go look and see what they're doing." Well, there was a roadkill deer that had run into the field, and they sat on that deer for over a week. Always one of them, at least, was sitting on that deer to keep everything else away from it. So Psalm 125 and 126, this is known as, we don't know who wrote it, it's part of a collection of songs known as the Songs of Ascent. Now, we don't 100% know why, but we think that these songs were sung by the Jewish pilgrims as they ascended to the mountain of Jerusalem, towards the Temple Mount. And we think that's why it's named that. Remember, God said in the days of Moses, he said, there are 3 times a year all men must report to Jerusalem. You have to do this. And so those were the Festival of Unleavened Bread. Anybody know what the name we use for that is? Festival of Unleavened Bread is Passover. Unleavened bread. The Festival of Weeks is Pentecost, because of the 50 days after Passover. And the last one is the Festival of the Tabernacles. And it celebrates rebuilding the temple. And it is typically celebrated by, in their day, they built shelters all around Jerusalem out on the edge of the wilderness. Today, Jews that still try to practice that celebration will build a temporary shelter in their backyard or something. They're supposed to sleep out in it at least a night or so, and they're supposed to remember that God provided for them in the wilderness. Go ahead.
Is that the festival of the booths?
Yes, same name. Yeah, the booths. I can't say that word though, so I don't try. It doesn't work with my southern tongue. Anyway, it would have reminded pilgrims of their history as they traveled. A lot of the songs are developed or designed, written, as, I guess the right word is a mnemonic. It gave you something to connect to a thought, and so you sang the song, and it reminded you of what you were singing about to help you remember it. It's kind of like, our song from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It has a rhythm and a tempo that helps you remember it. And so did their Song of Ascents. It's also a song of communal confidence. They expressed their trust as pilgrims that God would continue to watch over them. Even though they were no longer in the wilderness, they still needed God's protection. And the Song of Ascents did that as well. So, let's start with the reading. We're in Psalm 125, verses 1 through 5. So those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion, which cannot be moved, but it remains forever. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people from this time and forever. For the scepter of wickedness will not rest upon the land of the righteous. So, verse 2 there. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds his people. We have a camp song that way. Again, same idea of you learn a song which reminds you of the psalm, which reminds you of what God does. So that righteousness will not extend their hands to do wrong. Do good, Lord, to those who are good, and to those who are upright in their hearts. But as for those who turn aside to their crooked ways, the Lord will lead them away with those who practice injustice. Peace be upon Israel. And then Psalm 126, 1 through 6. When the Lord brought back the captives of Zion, we were like those who dreamed. Then our mouths were filled with laughter and our tongue with joyful shouting. Then they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. Another song we sing. The Lord has done great things for us. We're joyful. Restore our fortunes, Lord, as the streams in the south. Those who sow in tears shall harvest with joyful shouting. One who goes here and there weeping, carrying his bag of seed, shall indeed come again with a shout of joy, bringing his sheaves with him. So, how, in these verses, what are some phrases the psalmist used to describe the protection of God in these verses? Some of the word pictures he writes. How?
Well, I think that the beginning of it, you see, if you look at Jerusalem, you see it surrounded by 7 hills. And those hills kept their enemies from invading their city. And that's the picture it gives us of what God does for us.
Okay. He surrounds us, protects us, yeah, shelter. Anybody else? Okay, so the one on this side, what verse does that remind you of? From Luke 13:34, if you have to look it up.
To me, it reminds me of Peter.
Huh? That's a hen with chicks.
Oh, I thought it was I'm sorry, I thought it was a rooster.
It's a hen with chicks. Okay, so Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who were sent to you. How often have I longed to gather your children together as the hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. I've been trying to lose my voice all day. I had to talk to my pharmacist today on the phone for the shot I take, and it lowers my immunity really bad. She goes, have you had any big illnesses since you started this last month? And I said, no. Are you sure? I said, I don't know what's going on with my voice today. What does the psalmist ask God to do to the righteous?
Lift them up.
Verse 4. Do what?
Do good to them.
He'll do good to them. He'll lift them up. Now, does God say, or does the psalmist say, in the same phrase, so to the righteous he says, do good to them, Lord. Obviously we don't command God, but it's a statement. Do this. Does he phrase it in the same way in verse 5 to the wicked? And if not, or if so, why so or why not? I think it's in 126 verse 5.
Well, he'll allow it. I mean, if you want to do wicked, he's not going to stand there with a stone wall from what it says here. It says the Lord will lead them away with the doers of iniquity.
Okay, look at the phraseology there though. In the one he said, do good, Lord. Reward these people. A statement. I want you to do this. But when he talks about the unrighteous, how is he phrasing it, Josh?
Well, don't do bad to those that do bad.
No, not really.
I think
Good try.
that when you look at this, you see that one with the Lord doing good is an active thing, whereas the others, he just allows them bad things to come upon them. He doesn't necessarily force them or make them happen. He just allows them to reap what they're going for.
I'm not going to disagree with what either you said, but the way I saw it, again, not disagreeing with you, the way I saw it is we cannot declare, God, do this to these people. Because I don't have the right to judge. It's not my call to make. That's God's call to make. But I can say, God, do good to the good people. Why? It's a promise you've made us. You guaranteed us that. But so verse 5 it says, but as those who turn aside, the Lord will do this. He doesn't say, Lord, you will do this. He makes a statement of, he's going to take care of it. He's going to bring justice. And you're right, it may be today, but it may be at the end of time. Speaking of end of time, I got a phone call this week. I get some doozies, y'all. Usually late at night. A guy called this week and said, I'd like to attend your church. I said, well, we'd love to have you. Well, before I can come, you got to answer one question. And he said, the parable, 2 men are working in the field, one's taken up, one's left behind. Which one are you? And I said, well, I would think it'd be pretty obvious. I want to be taken up with the Lord. No. And he hung up on me. No discussion. He hung up.
What was the area code?
It was Freeport.
Oh,
There's a Freeport number. So actually what I believe that is, it means he's a premillennialist, and he's thinking in that sense, but where that scripture is, it's very clearly talking about the end of time, not, in a rapture time. Anyway, just the things that run through my mind randomly during the day. Anyway, why can you be confident that good will ultimately defeat evil? Let's look up a few verses. Numbers 23:19, please, Mike. Steve?
29 what?
23:19. Numbers 23:19. 1 Samuel. It's in the Old Testament. 5:29. Kaylee, you want to get Hebrews 6:18? Ron, can you find Psalm 89:35? So how do we know, how can we be confident in God's promise to do good? So Numbers 23:19.
Arise, Balak, and listen, hear me, son of Zippor. God is not human that he should lie, not a human being that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill?
When God says it,
Done.
when he promises it, it's done. Steve? 1 Samuel 15:29.
oh, 15.
Yeah.
And also the glory of Israel will not lie or change his mind. For he is not a man that he should change his mind.
So now Moses writes it. Now we got Samuel writing it. How about the Hebrew writer in Hebrews 6:18, Caleb?
So that by two unchangeable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for the refuge might have a strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us.
So now the Hebrew writer and the psalmist,
Once I have sworn by my holiness, I will not lie to David.
God says, I swear on my own name, it's impossible that I can break that. God can't lie anyway, but he says, I'm adding a layer to this. I'm swearing by my own power. Years ago when Bruce and I were re-roofing the round barn, for those who've been out there and seen that, it's a fir piece up. It's high. And Bruce was really nervous because it's steep, and he's like, I just don't know how we're going to do this safely. And he thought it was reassuring if we just park a scissor lift under in case we fall. And I'm like, no, not doing that. I've done some sketchy things with Bruce Harbaugh, but I wasn't doing that. So I got my climbing ropes and climbing harnesses. He goes, I'm not getting on that little wee thin rope. This rope will lift the car. I guarantee it. And he goes, So, to prove it to him, I ran backwards and jumped off the roof. And then just hit the brake on my rappelling line, swung back against the wall, lowered myself to the ground. He went, I guess I can trust it now. Well, it's the same, it's this two unchangeable things. It's impossible for God to lie. We've taken refuge in him, strong encouragement to take hold of the hope. So it's like, I've seen God's behavior. I've seen God say, I've seen those things come true. I can grab hold of the hope because it's a tangible thing now. All right, how does God want you to respond to his offer of salvation? This is an easy one. How does God want you to respond?
Accept.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Boy, that was a hard one.
With gladness in your heart.
Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I.
Give you rest.
Yes, See, that's one of those verses we know because that feels good. It feels good when you're tired, when you're stressed. I'll give you rest. I was counseling someone here in the community earlier this week over to Believe, and I talked about that. It's like the first step in healing is you've got to rest. You can't keep letting your mind spin out of control. You've got to slow it down. You've got to rest a little bit because you can't see clearly when you're exhausted and when you're frustrated and when you're angry and all these things. All right, what happens when you publicly acknowledge what God has done for you?
Probably be attacked.
Well, I guess that's possible. But what I really meant was not from the standpoint of what people do to you. I mean, when you declare this, what does God do to you?
You've acknowledged him, he acknowledges you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the first thing. Okay, I see you, Mike. You're mine. We're good. What else? Proverbs 3, 5 through 6 says, I will make your path. I remember? Straight. Which is easier to walk, a curvy mountain path or a straight line where it's flat? The straight line, obviously. God says, I'm going to make the road straight and level for you. That doesn't mean there won't be a pothole here and there. But for the most part, even with struggles and stuff in life, is your life easier as a child of God?
Amen.
Yeah, it is. Psalm 126:6 says, it's talking about turning cries of weeping into songs of joy. How does God do that? How does he take a bad thing and make it better in our lives?
You can bring something good into your life immediately following that bad.
Okay.
Testing's a part of our life.
Kind of like you get all that bag of seeds, you don't know if those seeds are going to grow. You don't know if they're going to survive or if they're good seeds or anything else. So the trust is there. You go out and you're afraid, you're scared, you don't know. That's what I got from this. But then the harvest comes. Wow, look at this. No idea.
Isaiah said in Isaiah 61, 1 through 3, and I'm going to take excerpts from it. He said, this is a list of things in those 3 verses that God says he will do to turn our weeping into songs of joy. I will bring good news to those who are poor. I have been sent to comfort the brokenhearted. I will proclaim that captives and prisoners have been set free. Verse 2, he has sent me to tell those who are mourning that the time of Lord's favor has come. I got it there? No. And verse 3, to all who mourn in Israel, he will give a crown of beauty for ashes, a joyous blessing instead of mourning, festive praise instead of despair. Verse 3 is how I will trade you these 3 things. I'll give you a crown of beauty instead of ashes. What's the symbolism of the ashes?
Mourning and
You sat in ashes. You might put ashes on yourself when you were mourning over your head. I'll give you a blessing instead of tears. And I will give you praise instead of despair. So, I'm going to talk about the veil for just a second. I have to read my notes on this one. Good grief, it's small. According to Henry and Richard Blackaby, the veil separated the people from the temple's most holy place as it had done for centuries. According to tradition, the veil was a hand's breadth thick. Okay? So it was that thick, this direction. It said it was woven with 72 twisted plaits, each plait consisting of 24 threads. So you think about that, 72 twists of 24 threads each. How strong is that rope? That's a strong rope right there. The veil was approximately 60 feet long and 30 feet wide. Can you imagine having to lift that up there if you were the maintenance guy? That thing was massive. So we're not talking about a small, delicate drape. The curtain was a wall made out of fabric. The fact that it was torn from top to bottom reveals that the hands behind the deed were divine. God himself grasped the curtain and ripped it in two. No more. No more division. No more separation. No more sacrifices. No more condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, Romans 8:1. Jesus himself bore our own sins in his body on the cross, so that we might die to sin and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. 1 Peter 2:24. Heaven's work of redemption was finished. Christ's death brought new life. Whatever barrier that had separated or might ever separate us from God was gone. Gone is the fear of falling short. Gone is the anxious quest for right behaviors. Gone is the nagging questions of, have I done enough? Am I good enough? Will I achieve enough? The legalist can find rest. The atheist can find hope. The God of Abraham is not a God of burdens, but a God of rest. So, Jesus' death totally changed. Do I have to keep all the laws perfectly? Well, I do my best to do it, but I don't live in fear that one broken rule results in death anymore. I do my best, and I don't have to say, what's the tally in heaven? What's my scorecard look like? Am I on track here? I'm getting older. I got to get on track. So it wasn't a small thing.
Jeff?
Yes.
I think the other thing, I think of Hebrews, for we're now able to go directly to our high priest because we are priests.
Mm-hmm.
And from my previous religious background, that was never possible.
Right. Yeah. We are a priest. Christ is a high priest, but we're a priesthood. The veil's open. We can walk into the throne room. And then again, Romans 8:23 or 32 says that the Spirit himself, goes to the throne. Jesus goes to the throne. God's on the throne. Our prayers are heard by them in heaven. By them/him. So, again, what's the significance to us? Someone turn to 2 Corinthians 5:21, please. Second Corinthians 5:21. Somebody read it. Okay, Mike?
In him who knew no sin,
Mm-hmm. I always, when I was singing, Sarah Lipscomb, part of my scholarship was to sing, to get kids to come to Lipscomb and travel around and did it. But I always had trouble with lyrics. I always have. But the lyrics to this verse, God made him who had no sin, so that we might become his righteousness. That just has always stuck in my head. The fact that Jesus himself was torn asunder for our sakes, took on my sin, he was ripped apart, so that I would be righteous. Okay, so what are some of the ways that people try to earn heaven? Libby?
You think they can buy their way to heaven?
Mm-hmm. Going all the way back to the Middle Ages, first ask the priest, if I pay you this much, will you forgive my sin? What were those called? Indulgences? What else?
still in effect today. Well, still practiced in some situations today.
Is it?
Absolution.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, absolution, yeah. What are some other ways besides the money way?
Some people think they can work their way to heaven.
Okay. Living a good life and doing for others, yeah. Do some people think that going to church is enough to get them in heaven? And then, you know, I'm going to change later, God, so just hang on. I'm coming. And that's a promissory note that's not going to get paid in most cases. Why is it so difficult for us to accept salvation as a free gift?
Contrary to, well, I'll speak for myself, it's kind of contrary to the way I was brought up. You work and you toil.
By today's standards, we're often told that if something is free, there's gotta be something wrong with it.
Yeah, how?
We know what we've done. More than anybody else, you know what you've done and why you shouldn't.
Am I the only one here that though still sometimes goes back with doubt to those old sins? Could he have forgiven everything? You know, did he really? I mean, I know he says he does, and I preach it and tell it to everybody else, but then every now and then, and what is behind that nagging, recurring thought?
Satan.
Absolutely. It has nothing to do with God, does it?
Exactly.
God tells me in his word, he says, Jeff, it's over. I forgave you of it. Let it go. Satan goes, but you did it. I remember.
Did he really say that?
Sounds like it in my head sometimes. You know, that's when I mentioned depression. Well, that's one of the worst things about depression because Satan uses that just to pull you down even further. Okay, why is not making a choice to accept God's gift a choice to reject him? Yeah, read it there. Why is not making any choice a choice to reject him?
I think there was a song by a group called Rush, and one of the lyrics was, if you choose not to...
Decide.
I'm sorry?
If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
Yeah. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I was watching a court case, a Zoom court case the other day, and the judge asked this person, I don't know what his problem was, and he was defending himself, which is automatically a bad idea. But the judge says, you know, okay, I need to go over your rights again. He said, first off, going pro se or defending yourself is an extraordinarily bad idea because I will not give you advice on how to go forward in the trial, and I will not give you any favors. You have to act as if you're a seasoned attorney. Do you understand that? That this is fraught with peril. That's the legal phrase he used. He said, I tell you, pro se is fraught with peril. And he says, I comprehend. Judge says, no. Do you understand, yes or no, what I'm saying? I heard the words. So the judge says, you know, go sit for about an hour and think about that, and I'm going to call you up again, because you have to say, and he said, all of these rights I'm going to list off, you must acknowledge, and he never would. And so finally the judge says, for the record, I'm going to declare by the fact that he said he comprehends, that's the same as understanding, and understanding is the same as agreeing that I understand, and I'm going to enter for him that he understood. Clearly the guy's just trying to get an appeal out of it, but, you know, that's lying by omission. That's not saying yes by using words to distract. We do the same thing. When we make a choice to reject God, it's lying by omission. We can say I accept him, but then when we don't do the things that we need to do, again, a lie by omission.
It's still alive.
It's still a lie. I never could convince my mother that it wasn't. But, what prompted you to seek God's forgiveness and salvation? What was it that made you decide to become a child of God? What was that kind of, if you remember, your turning point in your mind?
God's word said versus what I had been trained as a young person, they were conflicting, and I'm thinking, something's wrong.
If they don't add up, there's something wrong here, yeah. What else? I remember did I say teen class? I don't know if I think I was 13. The teen class on Wednesday night in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, at the church we went to. I don't remember the exact words, but I do remember how I felt, and that was afterwards. I was scared. Because, we were talking about salvation. I was scared that if I died that night, I was going to hell. And so I told Mom and Dad, we got home, turn around, let's go back. We lived a long way from the church. Dad loved it. But, turn around, I want to go back and be baptized tonight, right now. Anybody else remember what kicked it in your mind and said, let's do this? May have been camp for some people. May have been a health thing. All right.
I was just under the influence of various substances and said to
Yes, go ahead.
myself, there's got to be something.
I thought he was going to say, I made my choice while I was under the influence. I'm like, we need to study. We need to sit down and talk about that choice.
No, I was under the
Okay.
influence of stuff.
I got you.
And you just go, what is this? It's just not. It's just not it.
Gotta be something better than this
Yeah.
to life.
Yeah.
Has to be. All right, kind of last point, talking about security. Protection is a serious business, personal protection in the U.S. In the Middle East, when we were active in Afghanistan and all that, about 1 in 4 of the people you saw in uniform carrying guns were actually private contractors.
Mhm.
We called them that instead of saying that the U.S. was hiring mercenaries, but they really were. And the Wagner Company and others, Blackwater. There's a bunch of them. And they lived outside the rules. And I didn't like it. I didn't like them. But anyway, people in nations all around the world spend billions of dollars. You know one of the reasons that we have North Korean soldiers fighting in the Ukraine now? Because Russia traded weaponry and a brand new armor-plated limousine to him for all those bodies, which are being slaughtered. But, companies sprung up offering all the security and all that. We want to be safe. And the people of Israel wanted the same thing. And so they knew they had to have God as their protector. And so that's Psalm 125 too. As the mountains surround Jerusalem, so God surrounds his people now and forevermore. It just reminds us. It doesn't mean that only good things throughout history happen to the Jewish people. In fact, they got a pretty rough history as well. Some of it they brought on themselves, but some of it is just the world. Who wanted Hitler to kill 3 million? But they knew at that time, they had that thing of saying, I am God's chosen people. We are God's chosen people. God is with us. The same is true for us. We get trials, we get lied to, we get suffering, we get sick, we get death. All these things come our way, but we still can say, but I'm God's chosen person. Again, the thing of Jesus would have died for me individually, even if no one else accepts him. And that's a great thought. That glory and eternal life belong to us. So, just as you sit and think at home, what are some ways you've seen God actually protect you in your life? And that's just something to think back on. I've mentioned this before. And it is not an absolute given. There are no absolutes in this world other than God's promises. I had to throw that in quick. But I have been with many people. I don't know how many, but I've been with many people as they died. And the closer they were to God, the easier they passed. Now, the variables in that are if they're just racked with pain, that's uncontrollable, that sort of thing. But for the most part, if they were dying usually of the normal life processes, it went so much easier because they were accepting that this is just a part of this. And it was gentle, and it was quiet, it was calm. So I want that kind of peace of mind, no matter when my day comes. I want that kind of peace of mind knowing God's there, He's got me. He's got me. Any other questions, comments? You got 1 minute.
Well, we're not guaranteed that necessarily. We may be physically suffering tremendously.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not, but be aware.
Yeah, we're not guaranteed. Right. All right. Thanks, y'all. Remember, next Tuesday night we'll be here if you'd like to come for the cookie giveaway and a time of praise and song. No Wednesday night for the next 2 weeks.
What time?
Well, there will be a Wednesday night, but we won't be here. Wednesday's going to happen regardless.
What time on Tuesday?
5 o'clock. We'll put together cookie baskets.
Here?
Libby, you can't eat all the cookies before we take them somewhere. Yes, downstairs.
Does he always do that?
Would've sure ruined your day, didn't
Yeah.
it? Well, I'll make it 2. How you doing?
Fellow left side.
Hi. Nobody ever wants to sit over here.
I just feel like she's gonna get that.
Yeah.
Dinner deal?
Something on pink paper?
Dad is plugging it in.
Sit with me?
And so, how come she turn it off? It turned off all the way up. So the slaves, there's an hour and you don't turn everything on. You turn it on. There's a cookie.
Oh, who's on that? You sit with me. I like that.
I sure just like that. Only a little cake.
The older two have like themed week this week, and every morning he's like, "Well, I need to dress up like that too." Careful.
Oh no, that.
That's why we're very
They crumble.
It's safer for me to ride a bicycle.
You don't get them very often anymore.
I've always liked it. I'm more of a like a big curve.
I know, they are driving me nuts. They are so hyper, they have been doing so many holiday things. And I come home and I'm like, I am tired, why are you so hyper? Can we just sit? Like, I haven't even bothered to try homework this week, I'm like, I've got 2 weeks of break.